Hello and welcome to another episode on Disability Platform. Today I have with me Christina Warner. Christina, over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, I am Christina Warner. I am a barrister at 33 Bedford Row. I practice mainly family, but I do also have a side practice in animal protection, and I've got a background and actually some current work in international crime as well.
Wow, okay. So tell me, if you would, a bit about your disability.
So I have Stargardt's disease, which is a form of juvenile macular degeneration. So the way that I describe it to people is it's usually how older people lose their eyesight, but happening to younger people. It causes a loss of central vision. So you end up really being dependent on your peripheral vision. And as it's genetic, it's bittersweet that my brother also has the same condition. It's fairly more advanced in my brother. But both of us have the condition, and it causes sight loss. Eventually, it does take you, yeah, to minimal sight, to very low vision.
And obviously I feel an affinity because I have the exact same thing.
Yes,
And
yes. So it's
like you,
yes, we're part of the
we
Stargardt's
are.
crew.
And like you, my brother also has it, but mine is further along than my brother's because I developed it at an earlier age. Um,
Yes.
so tell me a bit about your job and then how your disability sort of impacts your work.
So I'm in court regularly. I was in court yesterday. I'm in court tomorrow. And the way that my sight loss has impacted my job, well, I feel very fortunate that I was once fully sighted. So I was once completely able-bodied. And I'm very much able to lean on that experience and apply it to my job, my practice, and what the expectations are of me day to day now. So I went through the Access to Work, the Department of Work and Pensions Access to Work scheme, and I have a PA who comes with me to work, and I'm very much dependent on IT, to be fair, as many of us are. And it's difficult in terms of post-COVID because my diagnosis, I only really decided to take the leap. And I say decided to take the leap because I've been masking my sight loss for many years. So I ended up getting my diagnosis during COVID. And I found that the courts, their procedures do seem to be going back to pre-COVID times.
Mm.
So as I said, I very much lean on my experience as someone who had full sight to be able to navigate around court buildings, but I still have full color spectrum, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm very much dependent on that to be able to get round court buildings, and really the finite things such as finding where the toilets are, finding my courtroom, having my PA tell me whether or not the judge is looking at me and asking me a question without addressing it directly to me. Those are issues that I look to my PA to help me with.
Okay. And do you feel from your own experiences that courts and judges and other people within the profession are sort of improving their stance on disability, becoming
Tricky.
more accommodating, etc.?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky question. Um, I think there's a greater awareness, but I don't think that's particularly localized to the legal system. I think that there's generally a greater awareness in the social consciousness as to disability and who we are. But whether or not, I don't think it's a coincidence that the judicial system seems to be taking that on as well. And I wonder whether or not, if there wasn't such a social movement at such speed as there has been in the last 15 years or so,
Mm.
whether or not the legal system would independently have drawn the conclusion that disabled people need assistance. And actually, there are certain things that can be put in place to assist us in accessing justice. So I think it's more than just a coincidence that disability has become so much more, as I said, has become part of the public consciousness, that
Yeah.
the judicial system is having to reflect that. But naturally, that's how it happens. Social movements then indicate what's going to happen in the legal system because it has to reflect it.
Yeah.
I think that the court system still has very much a long way to go. Everything from the macro to the micro, everything from being able to access a court building. If you're a wheelchair user, the steps are going to prevent you from being able to access the court building.
Yeah.
And similarly, I think people forget is if you one resolution of a logistical issue which could prevent a disabled people from physically being able to get into a court building could assist many of us. So someone, as I've got friends, practitioners who are wheelchair users, if there was a slope up to the court building or down to the court building, that may well assist me as someone who's low vision as well. It may assist someone who's pregnant. It may assist someone who's got arthritis, chronic pain, etc. So it can really assist many of us all at one go. I think that attitudes from court staff do need to change. I think there's very much an inconsistency. I've had some court staff comment on almost putting me to proof as to what level of eyesight I have, asking me how many fingers they're holding up, what colour their t-shirt is, what colour their hair is. I'm not there to be cross-examined by a member of court staff. No. I have encountered judges who have put me to strict proof as well as to why I need a PA. And I think what we forget is that barristers are in court for their clients. They're not there for themselves. I'm not there to talk about my personal business. That would be an absolute disservice to my client. But I have encountered that with judges who have asked me, well, why do you need a PA? And it takes a lot for me not to fall into a realm which could be considered unprofessional and say, well, what the bloody hell does that have to do with you? So
definitely. No, I can empathize. Obviously not in court, but within private practice, and similar sort of burdens of proof, almost, as it were.
Yes.
Can I ask, you mentioned that you got your formal diagnosis more recently, but you were masking your sight loss prior to that. When did your sight loss actually sort of begin?
So I noticed it, I'd say about 15 years ago, but and my brother already had his diagnosis. And my brother is now, how old's Miguel now? He was 40. He was 40 in December. Although in my mind, he's still my baby brother. He was 40 in December. My brother got his diagnosis mid-teens. I'm sure he was in his mid-teens. And at that time, everything was okay. I had a driving license, full sight. I think I wore glasses just because I was short-sighted. So I had a bit of trouble maybe seeing, I think there were blackboards back in the day when I was at uni rather than whiteboards. But I had trouble maybe seeing the board when I was at uni, but nothing that I thought, wow, this is really, really devastating. But I just assumed that was the case. And I think that's the problem with Stargardt's, that if it's slow burn, like it has been with me, you just assume you need glasses. And glasses can rectify the situation for a short period of time, but then it kind of, the way that I describe it, I think it just burnt through my eyesight like a forest fire. Because by the time COVID came along, and I was a regular runner, so I still, sorry, the cat's just meowing at me. He also has plenty to say about disability. I do apologise. He has a lot to say about the subject. He's also disabled. He's an elderly cat, and he has sight loss. So he's also representing it.
Right, fair enough. VI cat.
So fair enough. It spans across species. So I was an avid runner before COVID, and I still very much enjoy running. And I noticed it was during that period of time in COVID where you could only go outside when the planets aligned and the moon was in the seventh high, and that kind of period of time. And I would go out to go running, and I thought, I hadn't been able to read door numbers for ages, bus numbers. Oh, that was a distant memory. But I had trouble differentiating the drop in the curb. So I wasn't able to see where the windows on houses, if that, I know that it will make sense for you, but I couldn't differentiate the two. I couldn't see where a window ended and the house started, if that, the brickwork started, that edge. I had trouble. I couldn't see lampposts anymore. And I just thought, this is really bad. This is bad. This is so bad that I stopped running, as it had to be very, very bright for me to go for my run. And I just made the decision. I thought, if I don't do something about this, knowing that my brother already had his diagnosis, I thought, if I don't do something about this, I could end up having to manage multiple disabilities. I thought I could end up hurting myself really badly. So I took the I kind of came out of the disabled closet and went and got my diagnosis. And I was very lucky because my brother was already on the books at the Moorfield Eye Hospital, who are
Right, yeah.
fantastic. And, you know, they just kind of joined, all the tendrils came together, and the rest, as they say, is history.
And what I'm curious about specifically with the sort of professional side, because the personal stuff and the running and the fear of damage and injury and that kind of stuff, which would then impact your life even further, is something that I've had for many, many years. But when it comes to the professional side, and specifically sort of so talk to me about the the development process from between university to then qualify as a barrister, because obviously a lot of people who aren't solicitors or barristers just assume that when you get your law degree, you can then become a solicitor and barrister. It's that straightforward. But obviously there is a lot in between, and those in between stages can be incredibly difficult generally, and even more so with disability. So I'm curious, first of all, if you could talk me through the procedure to become a barrister, and then how the sight loss impacted that period of your life.
So my journey to the bar isn't the traditional route. So I did a 4-year degree, English law and Spanish law. I then did a master's. I then took some time out to save up some money. I then did the LPC, did my part-time study LPC alongside my training contract for 2 years. I was also a police station representative, kind of clocking up some experience and mileage on my CV as well for that. And then I got my higher rights. So by the time I qualified as a solicitor advocate.
Right.
And I did my training at a high street firm in Brixton, which was a fantastic experience because it was all very legal aid heavy. So you were very much encouraged to get involved in advocacy and every area of client care. And I then decided, because I was so regularly in court, I thought, well, actually what happened was I left legal aid to work for the corporate world, which was the biggest mistake of my life, as a solicitor. And then I decided that that wasn't for me, and I didn't want to stay within the kind of corporate realm. So a friend of mine said, why don't you apply for tenancy in chambers? And I thought, there's no way that they would want me. And lo and behold, I was really lucky. I did get tenancy, cross-qualified to the bar. And this, where I've been ever since, 10 years this year, I think it is, that I've been at the bar. So the way that when I did my degree, my master's, again, I just thought I needed glasses, and back then IT wasn't what it is now. iPads didn't exist.
No,
God,
exactly.
I'm talking about being from like the days where all the films were in black and white. I feel like I'm talking about that long ago, but it does feel like that long ago because technology has come so far. So when I was at uni, it wasn't, I just felt like I needed glasses, but I was still very aware that my brother, and I almost compared myself to my brother, and I said, well, I'm nothing like Mike. Mike has a completely different level of need. So I never attributed it as being a me thing. It was very much a my little brother thing. So by the time I got to do the LPC, I did think, I need to increase my prescription. Things aren't quite, but by that time, 2006, well, God, I can't even remember when I went to law school. When did I go to law school? But when I was at law school, I did start to think, okay, maybe I need to do something about this. But by that time, email was starting to become much more the preferred way of submitting documents, like you didn't have to go in and hand in a paper essay. Like when I was at university, it very much was, well, email your tutor, whatever the coursework is or whatever. So everything was becoming slowly but surely digitalized. So by the time I got to my training contract, I was leaning on that heavily. And I think that in turn didn't really bring the issue to the fore for me until really, I'd say, I got into practice. And again, I was so dependent on IT that it was only during COVID that I thought, wow, I think maybe my eyes resting for so long indoors, because we're all trapped indoors, that when you are forced to look beyond the parameters of the 4 walls we were all in, I thought, I cannot see anything beyond 3 foot in front of me. I thought, this is really tough. So that's really why I decided I have to do something about this before it gets to the extent where, yeah, I harm myself. Because yeah, I'll fall off a curb, or I could,
Yeah.
I'll bump into something and seriously hurt myself. And
Yeah.
I couldn't ignore the fact that my brother had a diagnosis and Stargardt's is genetic. So I thought, even for my own peace of mind, let's go and let's be proactive about this. So that's what I did.
And it's interesting, sort of your journey, and especially the introduction of the technology, because for me, I had my eyesight deteriorate in very early secondary school, and at that time it was still blackboards. There were no smartphones. I used a handheld telescope and a pair of binoculars to basically
Yeah, same
do
as my brother.
all
Yeah,
of my education. And it wasn't until the LPC came around. So after school, A levels, my first degree, I used my telescope, binoculars. Second degree, the law degree, again, binoculars, telescopes. It was only the LPC where I had an iPad, and that was a game changer because obviously I could see stuff
absolutely.
in front of me. And I think the question I get a lot of times when I disclose to clients that I'm registered blind, because clients won't see me walking around with a white stick because they don't see me
No.
walking around generally. They
Yeah.
won't see my disability when I'm sending them an email, so they won't know. It's only if they come into meetings face to face and you hold a paper to your face, or something along those lines, then it's kind of obvious. So when I disclose, people always sort of, they're just taken aback. They're like, "Oh, well, how did you become a solicitor? How did you, blah, et cetera, all these things." And I think it's worth mentioning because there's probably a lot of disabled young people who may consider careers in law, or who may discount it because they think there's so much heavy reading. But personally, for me, I think with the advancements in technology, and especially the screen readers and dictation software, your eyesight shouldn't really, and I say shouldn't because you can't say anything for certain in the legal profession, shouldn't be a barrier, because you can use all the computer software to have stuff read out to you and to dictate into the computer. So really, I think that the legal career, the legal profession, is accessible to disabled people, especially with sight loss. And that's my opinion on the solicitor side.
Yeah.
I would, if any young people are considering it, they want to have a chat, they're more than happy to speak to anyone. And so I'd like to get your take on the same career prospects on the barrister side.
Yeah. So I think what people forget is that disabled people generally, we're the ultimate problem solvers, aren't we? Because we're challenged. There's a setback, I suppose you can call it a setback, by way of whatever the challenge is, by our condition, impairment, whatever, however it is individuals want to define it and identify. But we are the ultimate problem solvers. And what I've found is, yeah, I think technology is absolute game changer. Absolutely. Like I think that as people with sight loss, we owe so much to those 100 years ago who didn't even get a diagnosis. And I can only imagine how difficult it must have been. But I think we need to lean on the skills that we have. So as someone with sight loss, what I've found is that as my sight has got worse, my ability to recall something that has been read to me has become much better. So my memory and absorption of information, I think, has become much better.
Yeah.
I also read things at a much faster pace, or I have things read to me on my iPad or on my computer much faster than I believe the average person can understand, because I've had comments from family members, and it's only my brother that understands that I can read something at such a speed that the average person with normal sight can't catch what's being said. But I find that my hearing now is so acute that it's a skill, obviously, that it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? And that your body compensates, your senses compensate.
Exactly.
So use the skills that you have. They make you, they will compensate, or I believe, this is just my experience, and I found obviously it's my brother's experience as well. It may be because we were born able-bodied and had progressive sight loss throughout life, rather than being born with limited sight already. I don't know the experience. Obviously, it might be different for those individuals, but don't play down the skills that you have. I think it's a tragedy that disabled students are fed this narrative that they are less than, or they simply do not fit the mold of a future practitioner because of their disability. It's rubbish, absolute rubbish. And if that's the case, and there's something in the system that isn't working in order for them to be able to reach their full potential. The same for students who are wheelchair users. If they are not able to access a court building, that is a problem with the court building, not a problem with them. So, and ask for what you need. Do not be ashamed. That took me a long, long time to start asking for what it was that I needed, what I need assistance with. Let it be known. If you need help, ask for it. Do not be ashamed, because that's then a greater issue. That then, like, it leaks into other areas of your life and really starts it starts eroding away your self-esteem. And the one thing that we both know is if you're in the legal profession, you need to make sure that you've got an ironclad ego, let alone anything else. So
well, I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks that.
No, we all know. So it's, you need to make sure that you're asking for legally what you're entitled to, and also what you need in order to be able to do your role as a student, to fulfill your best potential, your greatest potential. But lean on the skills that you have. I can't speak for those that have challenges by way of neurodiversity. I know that's another set of challenges, but I have friends who are practicing barristers and have autism or ADHD, and they have very specific things that they need in order to be able to fulfill the service that they need to for the client. But we have a legal right to access those resources. So ensure that you use that, is what I would say to potential up and coming disabled students looking to practice either as solicitors or barristers or legal executives.
I want to move on to a topic which you kind of touched upon, and I think is very
sorry, the cat's meowing again. I'm so sorry. Sorry.
So I think it's a very complex topic, but I think it's very interesting, and also it's just for me, it's sort of, the more I've discussed with people about it, the more it's turned into a sort of minefield. And that is a topic of disclosure. So some people disclose a disability straight away. Some people don't feel comfortable disclosing. Some people feel that it may negatively impact their prospects. Some people, if they present with a visible disability, have no option but to disclose. Others with invisible can have the choice. And it's all a very personal decision. So what is your take on disclosure?
I agree. I think it's very personal, and I think some of us don't have a choice. So I think those of us that have a non-visible disability, like those of us that have sight loss or we're hard of hearing, yes, we can hide in plain sight, as it were. But obviously, amputees or those that are wheelchair users, or if there's burns victims, those with facial disfigurements, they don't have that luxury. So I very much appreciate that privilege that we have as able-bodied presenting individuals. But that privilege only goes so far, because once you start navigating a room, having to read documents, speaking to people, I would much rather, and it's taken me a long time to get to a point where I'm comfortable with this, say the words that I'm visually impaired, than have people assume that there's something wrong and I don't know. Because I think it really depends, because I know that for myself, I went through a period of a lot of grief and a lot of anger. So I think that is a very bad space to be in. But once you've said it, it becomes a non-issue then. People, I think, out of curiosity, as human beings, we're very curious. They want to ask questions, and I'm more than willing to answer them if they come from a place of interest and authenticity. But if they're coming from a place of morbid, if it comes from a dark place of the person that's asking the question, I think you can clock that quite early on. But I think having dialogue and conversation about disability is crucial for people to understand. That's how we learn. But I do understand that it's very, very personal. Some of us have the luxury to a certain extent. Others have a greater luxury. And some people don't. They don't have the privilege of being able to mask or hide a disability, because it's part of how they are physically presented. So I appreciate that privilege exists, but I would much rather say it so we can move on and deal with whatever it is we're dealing with. What am I dealing with? Am I at the bank? Am I dealing with that? Am I at my GP should already know, but sometimes my GP doesn't, you know. Or am I speaking to a client? Am I, let's just deal with the issue, get it done. I've said what I've got to say. Let's move on with the matter at hand. That's how I see disclosure. As I said, questions usually come up as a result of me saying that I'm partially sighted. But if those questions are genuine, I don't mind answering them. It's when they become a morbid fascination that upsets me. That I just think we're not here for your entertainment, and you could become one of us at any time.
Exactly.
Disability, you could become
And have
one
you
of us at
had,
any time.
yeah, anyone, anytime. That's
Anyone
almost,
at any time. And actually it's a when, not an if, because as we know,
yeah,
mobility, cognitive and sensory function declines as you get older.
yeah,
So we're the largest minority group, which spans sexual orientation, race, religion, gender, across the board. And you could become one of us at any time.
exactly. I think the intersectionality of disability is so prevalent, and people don't
Yes.
realize, just don't realize how much it could impact them at any point in their life.
Absolutely. If it doesn't already and they aren't aware. So one of the things that I've found as well is that speaking to barristers about being visually impaired, because out of courtesy, I'll tell opposing counsel, this is my PA, I'm visually impaired. And it seems to open the floodgates. A lot of barristers want to tell me their stories. And I think it comes from a place of that basic humanity wants to relate to other human beings. I think ultimately deep down, there's an intention to learn about other people, but they will tell me that they may have they're managing with a child with autism. They're looking after a parent who's got dementia. They want to tell me their stories. And as much as I didn't invite the conversation, I appreciate that they want to relate to me in some way.
Yeah, I do think there is almost like a floodgate ready to be opened, and I
It's
think
cathartic. Yeah.
exactly. I'm hoping part of the impact of this podcast will be just that.
Yeah.
Lofty ambitions.
Prompting conversation, absolutely. Prompting conversation and dialogue, because there's nothing to be ashamed of. And it can be really lonely, and it can be really, really tough when you're on your own and you daren't say the words. I mean, when I just couldn't, it almost felt like I was summoning a demon by saying that I was visually impaired. It really, it took me so long to get to a stage where I was comfortable actually saying the words. And as well, I think that there is a profound sense of grief, but I think that then I look at people who have become amputees as adults or young adults. They go through that same sense of grief and loss as I did. It's just a different loss that we're suffering, but the grief is the same. And I think the more we have those conversations, the more we realize actually we're very similar. We're more alike than we are different. And that's what the disabled community, I think, needs to hear. We are very much like you. And we're no different. We just have a challenge, or we just live life in a different way, but it doesn't mean less than.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of the grieving process, and I don't want to say grieving, but that might be the right word, is almost...
Yeah, that's the word I use. Yeah, it's a sense of loss, and that's what grief is a sense of loss.
And I think it's more than just the loss of... I mean, to me, it's almost like, the loss of the sight is one thing, but then it's almost like the loss of the life that you had pre your sight loss. So it's almost like you're losing that life as well, because your life won't be the same. But then,
absolutely,
anything in life can change and your life will be different. So
yeah,
it's another, obstacle or characteristic that you need to navigate.
Yeah, I agree.
Any tips for disabled people thinking of entering the legal profession, young disabled, students who are looking forward to their future careers, etc., etc.? Any tips for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of tips. So first of all, get yourself a support network. So if you are a law student, there are associations. You can try All Bar, Association of Disabled Lawyers, bringing disability to the bar. All three associations, there's a mentoring scheme, I know certainly for bringing disability to the bar. Will team you up with either a practitioner who is disabled themselves, or a practitioner who is very interested in hearing more about disability. So get yourself a support network, get yourself buddies, because that's, I think, you can't make it in this profession without having mentors and without having a support network. And I know it's really tough, because I entered the profession without knowing anyone. I don't come from a family of lawyers. I knew no one. I was really flying solo. But once you start making those links, you can then access information or get the support that you will need as a disabled student, as a disabled person looking to practice law. So that'll be my first tip. I think my second tip would be, I think that well, maybe it goes in turn with mentoring and support systems. You need to ensure that you have everything that you need to be able to apply yourself to interviews, get the work experience that you need. So you've got a shining CV, because the legal profession is competitive enough as it is. And to make sure that you have as much as you can, kind of all of the skills that you have, so that by the time you get to an interview for training contract or pupillage or paralegal, by the time you get to that point, you're confident in your position. Because I think that a lot of disabled students already, which I absolutely understand and I sympathize with, their attitude is, well, what's the point in me pursuing this?
Yeah.
Because I'm just not going to get anywhere. If you have that support network in place and you've got those mentors in place, and you've maybe managed to get a mini pupillage or a couple of days at a law firm, you're going to be in a much stronger position to be able to get that job as a paralegal, get that training contract, or get that pupillage. And that's really, it's small, slow and steady wins the race. That's what it's all about. And that really stems from the support network, accessing associations that are interested in disabled students, joining committees. If you're thinking of a career at the bar, have a look at what your inn has. I know Middle Temple has a disability forum. Access all of the possible support networks, so by the time you get to interview, you're really confident. You're going in there like Billy Big Bananas. You're going in there with confidence, and you're ready to tell that you're ready to get that pupillage, you're ready to get that training contract.
Well, a lot to digest, and hopefully
a
lot that will be very useful to any students coming through and looking forward to their career in law.
Yes.
I think that's all we have time for today. Christina, thank you very much for joining me and for your insights and experiences.
So welcome.
And
yes.
Thank you very much.
Take care all.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.